Hi, everybody. It's Tom and Bill from Metazoa, and we're really excited to have you on today for our webinar about these big changes that are coming up with Salesforce security, specifically profiles and permission set. So just really quick here to get everybody sort of oriented here. We are doing a webinar today on preparing your Salesforce org for upcoming profile changes. These are big changes that are coming from Salesforce where they're really changing the way that they want to structure your security. And you're going to learn a lot about that from Bill today. He's got a great presentation that really breaks it down and gives you a lot of great advice on how you can kind of get from where you are now to where they really want you to be. So just real quick, for those of you that don't know about our product suite, we have a bunch of products that really solve problems that you run into when you have to manage Salesforce orgs, especially as they kind of grow and become more complex. So we have, our full suite that you'll see on the right-hand column here, and that suite really, covers everything that we do, all from one user interface. And you can kind of see a breakdown of some of the big categories of what we do here. As you see, we break them out into our individual centers. So we have our technical debt center, which is great for doing deep level technical debt removal. We actually kind of went through the API and came up with algorithms for huge amounts of the metadata that exist in your org to help you kind of know where it's not being used, give you tools to clean it up. So if you're optimizing your org, we have some great tools for that. We have really deep level documentation for Salesforce. So that could be data dictionary to document your schema, but we can actually document almost any metadata process. So imagine building really nice human readable documentation for flows, for sharing rules, for workflows, for queues, for roles, for, you name it. We have deep tools for managing profiles and permission sets. We're going to see a lot of that today. So I won't spend too much time there other than to tell you we have some great tools to really help you manage security and help you manage big changes like we're going through now with Salesforce. And we have tools for both relational data migration and release management. And then all of that rolls up. You can get all of that from one user interface, from one big toolbox, if you will, with our Snapshot suite. So if you have interest in any of these tools, they're all on the App Exchange. We do free trials, and we'd love to talk to you more about them. All right, so just a real quick slide on profile management. I won't spend a lot of time here because Bill's really going to be highlighting some of these things. But here's just a quick look at that one section of what our suite does, and those are deep tools for managing profiles. So whether that's using a matrix-based approach to document security for profiles, permission sets, or groups, combining those things to look at user access in a matrix, doing things to edit, manage, and deploy profiles, intelligent merging of profiles or permission sets. We have really, really deep level tools that help you do all that, plus manage assignments and other things as well. So really, I think the deepest suite of tools for managing security in Salesforce, and tools that are, I think, really critical for going through a major sort of paradigm shift that we're all going through now with these new changes that Salesforce is bringing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill here and let him drive the show. So Bill, I'm going to give me just 1 second. I'll hand you the reins. All right, Bill, you are in charge, sir.
All right. Hello, everybody. Let me see, get shared up here. Can you see my screen?
I got you.
Let me jump into full screen. All right, thanks for tuning in. My name is Bill Appleton. I'm the CTO at Metazoa. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm here in Los Gatos and excited about talking about profiles and permission sets. Boy, it's been a journey, and the journey's not over. So a lot of things to learn, a lot of changes. It all started back really at the very beginning of Salesforce. Profiles were there on day one pretty much, and they had object permissions and field permissions, and then they got kind of expanded with custom applications and custom tabs, and then Apex classes and pages, and then layouts, and then and now there's even more different categories of permission than I've listed here in your profile. And so they got to be really big and really complex and really just kind of like a giant soup of permissions, and that kind of became a problem. And really the issue is, if you have too many permissions in your profile, it's hard to manage. It's hard to edit. If you go, in a large Salesforce org, if you go edit the profile, it can take a couple of minutes for that page to come up. It just shows you how big and complex they are. And they also not very flexible. They have very limited user assignment options. Every user has one profile, and that's it. That's the assignment option. So really profiles don't lend themselves to a top-down security design. They're more of a result of complaining. I need this permission, go deal with that problem. Or I need an exception, or something's different about my permissions. And so that's kind of how profiles got started. And one of the most common problems with them is you would see some user needed a new permission for his profile. And the admin really only had two choices. One, they could duplicate the profile and add that new permission, but then they had a whole new profile just for this one user. And the other choice was they could add that permission to the existing profile, but then all the users assigned to that profile ended up with the new permission. And that's not good for security. You're giving people permissions they don't need. So this was really a big problem, and it kind of got worse as Salesforce got bigger. And in 2012, they came up with a nifty solution called permission sets. So a permission set is like a sparse miniature profile. It has all the permissions, but they don't have everything. So they don't list your default applications and record types. They don't cover your layout assignments, login hours, IP ranges. But other than that, permission sets could grant permissions that you needed. And so you went from this situation where every user had a base profile to this situation where you could be granted a permission set that would give you some additional capabilities. So what's wrong with them? Not much. They're pretty good. They were mainly used for exceptions in the beginning. Can they replace a profile? Well, profiles are kind of gigantic. Permission sets are kind of small. And it doesn't really do you a lot of good to take all of these giant complex permissions in your profile and then put them in a permission set. I'm not sure what that accomplishes either. Another issue with them is they require user assignments. So we'll talk about this, but there's a junction object, data, not metadata, data that connects a user to a permission set. And so if you have a ton of users and a ton of permission sets, then that's an issue. You've got to manage all those things. You've got to have the right things connected together, or people get the wrong permissions. And so to address some of these issues and kind of to expand on this whole vision, Salesforce came out with permission set groups a couple years ago, and you may have heard of them. Here's how this changes the situation. So in the beginning, every user had a base profile, and then they could be granted a permission set, which would expand their permissions. And now with permission set groups, you can also assign a permission set group to a user. And the permission set group can be any combination of permission sets that are in the group. So this is a really powerful new idea that lets you bundle up a bunch of permissions and assign them with a single assignment. So it's super, super useful, permission set groups. And this is a really important slide because it really shows what I think you should be going for. And that is to add clarity, context, and meaning to your permissions and to your Salesforce org. So we've got the user Bob here, and Bob has a profile. He's in the marketing group, and the marketing profile has just the bare minimum stuff that anybody in marketing needs, nothing else. And now Bob does some Einstein forecasting. So he has a permission set that grants him access to Einstein. And Bob is in the advertising group. So he needs access to both opportunities and campaigns. So he's also been granted the permission set group to cover that all the people in advertising has. So here's what's useful about this. You can look at this. Your auditors can look at this. anybody can look at this and kind of figure out what Bob's permissions are and that they make sense. And they have structure. So instead of this giant blob of a profile, we now have structure around these permissions and they make sense to people. So just when you thought it was over, turns out Salesforce wants to change some things. And it's 2 or 3 years away. It's still a little bit early, but the basic idea that we're hearing from them is that they would like to pull most of the permissions out of the profile object. And I think it's a reaction to the problem of gigantic monolithic profiles. Let's split those up into some entities. Let's give them some structure instead of having all these permissions in one spot. And they want the profile of the future to look like the minimum access profile. In other words, it has no permissions. There are some exceptions to this that are important. One is that your default record types and applications would still have to be in a profile because that won't work for a permission set because that's a unique setting. And your page layout assignments, which touch both objects and record types on the one hand and page layouts on the other, they have to be, for the same reason, in the profile. And also your login hours and IP ranges. So then kind of moving forward, the best practice would be for your page layouts to have one page layout per object / record type. And then they want people to use Lightning record pages in dynamic forms instead of page layouts. So when this happens, profiles will be very much simplified, and they want to move all those permissions out to permission sets and permission set groups. So that, as far as we can tell, is what they're thinking about. It's a ways away. And one thing I really have no information on is how this transition is going to happen. You can't just turn off the permissions in the profile one day. That would be really bad. Everyone would come into work and they'd be unable to access anything. So they have to think through some type of transition to make this whole thing happen. And I want to share with you a few of their Salesforce slides. I've been told I can share these to kind of show the vision of what they're looking for. So down here at the bottom, you'd have your minimum access profile. And then you see we have 5 columns here. And those would be essentially the new profiles constructed out of permission set groups. So you would have all your support team in one group, executives in another group, and so on and so forth. These would be 5 permission set groups. And everyone in this picture has the same minimum access profile. And then you would build up by layers, the permissions you needed for support or for sales, the permissions you needed for the support apps or the sales apps would be read access, object permissions. And then permissions for each individual persona, which could be overlapped across groups if you want. And then lastly, since we're using permission sets and permission set groups, we can add muting permissions. So they're showing here that they've muted the ability for the executives to delete things, which is, probably a good idea. And so, and by the way muting permissions work is it's a permission set that's assigned to the group that's designated as a muting permission. So instead of granting a privilege, it removes a privilege. So they're removing the delete privilege here from the executive team. Now, I want to make a few comments about this picture. There's some things that I think need to be said about it. One is, if you look at the bottom, where they have the Salesforce minimum access profile, I think that scenario is unlikely. Unless every person in your company has the same login hours, the same IP ranges, the same record type and application defaults, the same page layout assignments, then that's not going to work. So it would certainly work fine, though, to have a different minimum access profile at the base of each one of these permission set groups. So then you'd have 5 of those that would be at the bottom instead of one big one. And so then what have you done? You've taken your profile and you've transformed it into a minimum access profile and a permission set group with all of these required permissions. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Another thing about this picture that I think should be pointed out is that there's no horizontal way. There's no structure to do things in a horizontal way. So for example, if you look at in the middle here, the sales apps, this is a permission set that's been assigned to 1, 2, 3, 4 permission set groups. Here in the sales team, the persona sales team, that's a permission set that's been assigned to two permission set groups. So logically, you can get to this picture, but there's no automatic way to do it. You have to assign the permission sets to the right groups and make this happen. The other thing I want to point out is this whole picture is just the thing that replaced your profiles. We still need permission sets and permission set groups probably for exceptions and for individual permissions that are different. So, you might have one particular employee that needs the ability to import or export something. That would be a permission set granted to them. So all of those permission sets are not on this picture. They would be north of here. They would be up in this white area here. And, I guess, that's going to complicate the picture to some extent. But what I like about all of this is that it's definitely breaking out a monolithic profile and adding structure and clarity and meaning to the profiles and making a more manageable and understandable way that all of your permissions are being assigned. And I think that's what they're going for. So what should I do now? I think is the right time to ask this question. So we don't have a ton of clarity on the destination Salesforce is looking at. We think they want to really simplify profiles. And we definitely don't know much about the journey to get there, what the transition is going to be there. But I think there's some best practices that absolutely make sense now and in the future and will continue to make sense. And we should talk about those. So one is you should consolidate and simplify your profiles. This helps you get ready for this new world where you can't have 200 users and 150 profiles. That's just not good. That's a statistic you should keep an eye on, is what's your user to profile ratio. They should have a lot more users than profiles. So you really, if you find yourself with a bunch of complex profiles, you should consolidate them and simplify them. And the other thing is adopt permission sets and groups and add structure, clarity, and meaning to those assets. And both permission sets, permission set groups, and profiles have a description field. You can fill out a lot of information there and offer descriptions. This helps your admins, this helps your developers, it helps your auditors, and it's going to help the new wave of artificial intelligence also understand the permission structure of your org. And so, clarity and meaning, structure, your described fields, your definitions, all of that's really important. Now, if you're really gung-ho, you could go farther and move to minimum profiles. And that's where you take all of your existing profiles, cut their permissions back till they're the same as a minimum profile, and then do everything with permission sets and groups. And some people are doing that. That would definitely get you ready for this transition. And it would be a very seamless transition for you if you're in that position. Should you do that already? I'm not sure I'm ready to recommend it. I think we need to learn a little bit more in the upcoming 6 months or a year about the exact changes underway. But I think there are definitely some best practices here that you can adopt now. So I want to talk for just a second about some of the technical issues that you're going to run into in any type of transition like this. So you're re-architecting your permissions. What kind of technologies are you going to need? What are you going to have to do to make that happen? The first one is this concept of merging similar profiles. So I told you before why orgs tend to have a bunch of very similar profiles, because they've added exceptions for individual users. And so in order to do this, what you're going to want to do is, here we've got a user with his profile and another user with their profile. We want to merge those two profiles back to the base profile, the common permissions in both of them, and then kick out permission sets for the difference. So the user permissions don't change at all. They each get a new permission set, but you take two profiles and combine them into one and simplify the profile. So this is an absolutely core technology for cleanup, for this new world, for moving forward. And of course, if one of these profiles was the base profile, then when you were done with this, they would both be the base profile, the minimum profile, and you would create permission sets for the difference, which totally implements Salesforce's model from 2 screens ago. Another thing that's important, permission set factoring. So you're going to end up with boatloads of permission sets. And if you're not careful, you'll have duplicates. You'll have this, these two permission sets are a subset of this permission set. How do you do factoring of permission sets? So that's another really important technology. And another thing you can throw at this problem is permission set groups. So here we have 3 users, each connected to the same 3 permission sets. And so an answer there is to move them to a permission set group, reduces the total number of assignments, simplifies it, makes it clear that these 3 permissions are often used together. You can give that group a great name, a great description, and it adds clarity and meaning to your structure of permissions. So if you think about the old world, you had this monolithic profile that was gigantic, and it had a boatload of permissions in it. That's kind of the problem. But they're all in there, swimming around, doing all kinds of stuff, really hard to go look at, figure it all out. And so the new world, we want to look more like this, where there's structure and clarity and meaning to all of your permissions. But there's actually a problem with the new world, and I want to bring it up. And that is that to some extent, you've traded all of this hidden complexity inside the profile for boatloads of assignment junction objects in this new world. And so what you've got is this user has a permission set. Well, there's a junction object that connects them. They've got a permission set group, another junction object. The permission set group has 2 permissions, 2 more junction objects. So this can be an issue, managing this stuff. Also, just using the setup menu to structure all of these links can be really difficult and slow. So this is kind of another challenge that I think you're going to face. So now I want to talk a little bit about what capabilities Snapshot has that can help you deal with all of this stuff. And I'm going to show you this stuff live, but also want to kind of just talk about it at a high level first. So one thing we can do is we can show you the combined security for a given user. And what this does is it shows you the user's profile, and then all of the permission sets and the permission set groups that they've been assigned, and then how their permissions change with each one of these assignments. And if you look over here at the right, the items in green show a user who started out with this, had a bunch of permission sets, and ended up with that. And the elements in red show permission sets that were granted that didn't change any permission. So those are wasted permission sets. It's another issue to think about for cleanup. So that's an absolutely core report because it shows you what permissions the users actually have. And if you think about, let's say you're doing a giant cleanup, right? You want to start with the users having these permissions. You want to do your giant cleanup. And when it's all over, you want the users to have the same permissions, right? I mean, you might have cleaned some up or changed some or granted some or whatever, but basically you don't want to add a bunch of permissions or delete a bunch of permissions as a result of your permission cleanup. So you could use this report to prove it. And then you could say, well, yeah, we started out here, we made a bunch of improvements, and we ended up here. And there were no differences in that user's permissions. I think that's really important. Bulk editing of permissions. So this is another hot button issue. I'm going to show you our interface. You can go in here, shift click, control click, change tons of permissions at the same time, and then deploy them immediately right from the same report. Probably want to deploy them to a sandbox or something, but you could also deploy them to production if you were sure about what you're doing. Profile comparison. How has my profile changed over time? So this is also important for security, but basically if you're looking at a time series of changes of your profile, how's it changing over time? How's it changing between 2 orgs? Is sandbox the same as production? And so this is an interface that will help you do that. Permission deployment. A cool thing Snapshot can do is we can deploy atomistic individual permissions, which is really useful. So you can see, if you just want to deploy, one object permission or one individual small little permission, you can do that. Very useful for maintaining orgs and for cleanup as well. Permission assignment. So if you remember, I talked about this problem where you've got all these permission sets and all these groups and all these users and all these profiles and the connections between them. It's the assignments that matter. And so how do you bulk edit those and edit those very, very quickly? And this is an interface for doing that. And the interface also has some really nice capabilities to do, Venn diagram unions, intersections, and merges of permissions. So for example, you could use this interface, get a complex profile, subtract out the minimum profile, and save the difference in a permission set, which is exactly the Salesforce model of, move to minimum profile and come up with a permission set that shows you the difference. So this is a really useful interface. And merging similar profiles. So this is a little bit of rocket science that will let you select some profiles that are similar and see how many permissions are needed to make up the difference. And if it's a good change, if you don't want to create too many permissions to make up the difference. But if it looks good, then you can actually merge the profiles. It'll create the base profile and reassign all the users for you to their new permission sets and profiles. So super powerful. All right, so I'm going to switch now to a live demo. And hopefully everybody can see my screen. So first I want to show you our combined.
Bill, we do not see your screen. We see your mouse moving, but not the screen.
Okay, thank you.
Are you just sharing? There you go, we got it.
Is that good? Okay.
Yep, you're good.
So I want to show you first the profiles and permission sets report. This is really key. So here's all your profiles down the left and all of their different characteristics across the top. So you can show Apex classes, everything. Here's, object permissions and, tab visibility. They're all here and you can scroll through all of this and check them out. And then we have your permission sets, which do the same thing. So these are all of your permission sets. And then we have your permission set groups. This is cool. It shows your groups rolled up by permission minus the muting permission. So this is an accurate reflection on exactly what permissions that group is granting. And then down here you have the combined security report, which I showed you before. But as you can see, here, for example, this user was granted no access based on their profile, but then a permission set granted them edit and read, and now their combined security is edit and read. So it shows the actual permissions that individual users have given all of their profiles, permission sets, and permission set groups. So really a core report. And like all the snapshot reports, you can just click these boxes over here at left, and you can go to the display report tab, and it will generate all of those reports in a giant table, and you can export that as CSV, PDF, HTML, native Excel, anything you want. And so it's this is really a key security report for dealing with profiles and permission sets. All right, let's look at bulk editing. So this is a different interface where you can, for example, these are object permissions, where you can show an editing palette, and then you can select whatever you need to work with, make changes to it, apply the changes, and immediately go into deployment. Those are the profiles I changed. Here's the deployment interface. And I can, for example, go here and do a test deployment and make sure that that'll go through. I can either save the job list and give that to my release management team, or I can actually make those changes right now in the report. So that's a really nice ability for bulk editing, very important. And let me also show you profile comparison. So we've got a snapshot here, which is a metadata picture of my org, and a snapshot here. And now I can right click and I can compare profiles, and it will show me all of the differences. And I can do that in a, see in red versus in green. Here I can see what's different, what's the same. And matter of fact, if I wanted to export this to Excel, these scrolling tables aren't going to help me. I can go to a single table, and now it's every other row is every other permission. And so now I can take that out to Excel, to CSV, to whatever I need, PDF. And so again, important for security, important for compliance, and important to see how your profiles have changed over time. All right, so I want to show you just really quickly deployment. If you double click on an arrow, it does a deployment between those two snapshots. And you can go to create assets, and I can look for profiles and say, hey, let's look at application visibility. Here's a particular application visibility, and I can see it right here up top. And now I can take that and go straight into deployment. So super useful. You can deploy individual pieces and parts of profiles if necessary, which is very, very helpful. So we talked about the junction objects, the assignments that assign permission sets to users, permission sets to permission set groups, and permission set groups to users. And so those can be a real hassle to edit. So we've got an interface for that called user permission assignments. And what this will do is it will show you for any selected user all of their profiles, their permission set groups, and their permission sets. And you can make a change, save the changes, and just like that. So you can change a whole bunch of things at the same time, and it'll make all of those changes, additions, deletions, everything for you. It really simplifies complex assignments. Also, you can switch here. So let's focus instead on permission sets, and I select a permission set. Now it shows you the opposite stuff. Now it shows you the groups that that permission set is in and the users that that permission set is directly assigned to. And you can do the same with groups and profiles. So, and while I've got you here, one of the things you can do is if you're focused on permission sets or groups or profiles, you can right click and edit them. So let's edit this permission set. And so one of the things I might want to do is it'll come here, it'll show me all of the different permissions, makes it really easy to edit permission sets and make changes to them. We've got a button up here for calculations. And so what I could do is I could select a profile over here, a complex profile, and I could select a profile over here, like, let's see, where's a good one? Like read only. And then I can select any one of the mathematical unions here that I want to work with. So for example, in this case, I would be getting all of the permissions from the admin profile and subtracting out all of the permissions from read only. And I could save that, work, and boom, now I've added that to my permission set. Now I can save that. And so right there, I've implemented, one of those groups that Salesforce has for their new model of permission set groups and profiles. All right, and so something else on this interface I think is worth mentioning, and that's merge profiles. So this is a really powerful interface. You can select profiles over at left that are similar, and you can calculate the replacements. Now, when you calculate the replacements, you'll get a permission set for each one of these profiles. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to take these two profiles, or 3 or 4, however many you select. It'll merge them into the common base and then create a permission set for the differences. And so we see right here, this created 2 permission sets, one with 12 permissions, one with 9. And now I can click this button. It will create that new profile. It will create those permission sets. It'll reassign all the users, and boom, you just got rid of a profile. So this is a really powerful technology. I'd probably run it in a sandbox and use the reporting that I showed you to make sure that you got the results you wanted, that those users, have the right permissions. But that's the merge profiles. So that's pretty much all the things I wanted to show you here today. And so hopefully we have time for some questions.
Yeah, we got quite a few. Bill, why don't you share your slides and put it on the contact slide for us, just so that people can see all the ways to contact us if they need to. So if you have anything we didn't address today, you know, a lot of ways you can contact us here. Email us at sales or support. Go to the website. Of course, we're on the App Exchange with Snapshot and all of our other tools. You can just search Metazoa and find them all. We do have some questions here, so let's fire away. So the first question here is, when merging profiles, how can I tell which profiles are good targets to merge? And we have a great report for that, Bill, our similar assets report. We have a report called Similar Assets, which can analyze anything. You can analyze objects or fields or, flows or whatever, and it'll tell you how similar they are. And you could run that for profiles, and it'll come back and show you percentage-wise how similar different profiles are, and even what the differences are if you really want to drill down on it. So one of the best use cases is to take that to figure out what are good targets to merge, and then go to that merging interface that Bill was showing. That's a great way to handle it.
Hey,
Bill, we've got some other
I
questions
would
here.
say
Yeah, go ahead.
one other thing about that. Also, when you do merge profiles in our interface, it'll show you the permission sets that it wants to create, and it'll show you how many permissions are in each set. So if you merge two profiles and those numbers are low, that's good. If you merge two profiles and one of the permission sets is 5,000,
100 permission set. Yeah, right.
That's bad. So
right. Yes. Okay, so here's one. Is there a way to view all assigned permission sets that would combine direct assignments and those assigned via permission set group? View all assigned permission sets and those assigned via permission set group.
Well, the combined security report shows the profile and then all of your permission sets, and also all the groups are in that list. So I think
I think in that scenario, most people are looking at user access, right? So that you could take the users and then get a walkthrough, as Bill showed you, a combined look at where they started with the profile, any permission sets or groups that are assigned, and where they ultimately ended up, whether that's elevation of security or redundancy, where you might want to do some optimization.
And also, I don't know if you saw the user permission assignment report, but if you go down your permission sets, each one, you'll see the permission set groups it's been assigned to and the users it's been assigned to. So that's another useful.
That's a good point. What is your recommendation regarding assigning permissions to Experience Cloud users? We have 375,000 plus, Experience Cloud users who need to have permissions assigned when the users are created, and have new permissions assigned, e.g. new audience. So that permission assignments is definitely the place to do that, but I don't know about doing an assignment for 375,000.
I don't know that we've tested it for 375,000. I'd like to.
Yeah. So our user permission assignments definitely could help there. Reach out to us, hit us up at sales or support email, and we'll be glad to walk through it with you and see how it works in your scenario.
Yeah, you don't have to have them all at the same time. So you go to the find users interface, and you kind of need to, divide them up by something or other. Maybe it's just new users, but you can find users by anything, including SQL queries.
Yeah, when you were looking at that left-hand column in our permission assignments where Bill had a list of users, those are just a few he dialed up. But you could say, show me all my users with this profile, or show me all my users with this permission set, and it'll dial up the whole list of users. It could be, thousands or whatever.
But you could also find new users that are incoming into Experience Cloud.
Right. Yep. Okay, so what is the interface tool or page in Salesforce showing it right now on the screen on profile permission set comparison? I'm not sure what that means.
Did he mean maybe in Snapshot that?
The interface tool page in Salesforce showing you were showing it right then, showing it right now on the screen, profile permission set comparison. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what that is, but just hit us up. You see the emails there. Send an email to our support team, and we'll be glad to dive into that with you. Okay, we got, can I compare two permission sets that are part of the same org with Snapshot? Yeah, absolutely. When you saw Bill show that matrix is trimmable. So, we had all the permission sets going down the left-hand column and then whatever security across the top. You could say trim it to just these two and then flip through the different parts of security and see a direct, inline comparison of the two. So we can compare profiles, permission sets, groups inside of an org or across two orgs as well. How is system administrator profile changing? Will we now have to manually build that full access for every org?
Yeah, so I guess the answer is yes. And so if you think about this transition just for your system administrator profile, you're going to go from the great big system administrator profile to that becomes minimum access. And then you're going to get, depending on how you want to do it, a permission set group that's assigned to all of the same people. And then all of the permissions you need to be assigned, the permission sets need to be assigned to that group. And so that's the best practice Salesforce was talking about. You can automate a lot of that with Snapshot, but I think the answer to your question is, yeah, they're trying to, I think the basic goal here is to break the profile into pieces so that it's easier to manage. There's another thing going on which bears mentioning. There's aspects of the profile where profiles are not sparse. Permission sets are sparse. And here's what I mean by that. If you look at a permission in a permission set, it only has the permissions that are granted in the permission set. Profiles have a lot of permissions that are also not granted. So if you look at field permissions in a profile, there's a bunch of them for field permissions that are granted, and then there's maybe tons of them for field permissions that are not granted. So that's a really inefficient thing about profiles, and it makes the size of profiles just go crazy into the megabytes if you download all that information as metadata.
Yeah. So we have another question here. You can merge profiles. Can you merge permission sets? And the answer is yes. If you saw Bill when he was showing sort of the Venn diagram with the circles, you could select two permission sets there and merge or pull the permissions from one to the other, to one way to the other, and then fire that out as a new permission set. So yes, we can merge both profiles and permission sets. If you need a walkthrough of that, again, just hit us up and we'll take you through it. It says I have an email alert which is being used in a flow, and when I search using assets, it doesn't give us anything. Would there be a way to get that info? Okay, I think this is a non-permission set related question. Sathvik, just hit us up, email support, and we can help you get that taken care of. Thank you. How do you deploy edited permission assignments after making edits? You didn't show. Okay, yeah. So I think maybe Bill showed when he was doing editing in the matrix. Once he clicked save or apply, you saw those permissions apply into the matrix, and then a little orange button pops up at the bottom. It says deploy. It's our smart deploy button. If you click that, that'll take you straight into the create job list and a deployment interface with everything that you edited. And one thing that Bill didn't mention, but that's pretty cool, is that you could iterate through multiple matrices. So I could do some object permission editing, flip over, do some Apex class editing for those profiles, flip over, do some flow access editing, and then go hit that deploy, apply it, hit the deploy button, and we queue all of that up. So all of those changes are now pulled into that job list so that then when you deploy it, you've captured all the iterative changes that you did through the matrix. So we have a great tools for that. If you need a walkthrough of it, schedule a training or hit us up on our support email and we'll help you with it. A lot of questions on recording. We did record this and we will send it out to you maybe tomorrow or Thursday at the latest. You should get a link with the recording to watch all this. It says, can we control naming of the auto created permission sets, or Snapshot creates it without user input?
Yeah.
We just saw the merge interface, Bill.
Yeah, it's a great question. If you right click those permission sets, you can define their name, you can give them a license, you can give them a description.
Yeah.
Yeah. As most things in Snapshot, if you want to do it, right click it.
Yeah. So this question just says, what about new app installs for access? Not sure what the intent of that question is.
Well, I mean, most new app installs have permission sets these days, right? I mean,
It's a package,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Ask the question again if we're not understanding.
Yeah. Retype it in. Give us some clarity there. Trying to suck it into our brain. Do we have provision to have reports when profiles are merged to identify what the profiles merged, what the permissions merged? It's interesting.
Well, the new base profile will be, will, you could look at that in the profiles and permission sets report. And what you'll see is that it's the common denominator minimum of the two profiles you selected. And then the two permission sets that were created will be all of the stuff that was different for those two groups of users.
We also have, if you take before and after snapshots, you could use our time series. We have a time series feature that would let you see changes to metadata over time. So you could look at it before and then afterwards and kind of have a diff of what's changed. You could have the diff report of what's changed before and after. So if you're doing that in a sandbox and you kind of want the before and after snapshot of all those changes, we do have reporting that can help you there. So how to handle flows or lightning pages that use the existing profiles? Will Snapshot handle that?
Yeah, I mean, so actually flow access is something that's in the profile today. It's quite important. And lightning page access is actually in the custom object. It's not in the profile at all. That's we have a report that shows that. It's kind of wacky the way they did that. I think they were trying to prevent putting more and more stuff in profiles. But the flow accesses are in the profiles, and now that's also, it's either supported by permission sets or it will be. It wasn't at one point. I don't know at the moment if it is, but it has to be. It will be. And so, yeah, we would handle all of that. And yeah, so the flow access, for example, will go from the profile to the permission set in all these operations.
So we got the one question we had about apps. They've kind of added a little for us here. It says the package usually has three options: system admin, all users, specific profiles.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. I mean, so this change to the profiles is potentially going to be disruptive. And I think we all need to kind of have a big discussion to make sure that it's not too disruptive. But like that's a great idea. I hadn't even thought of that, installing an app exchange package. How do you identify the admin profile or anything else? So it's a good point.
Yeah, maybe they'll have to tie it to groups or something. I don't know. Let's see. Okay, I think that's it for our questions today. If you guys have questions that we did not get answered, please just use the email you see on the screen. We'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. We really appreciate your time today. Obviously, we've put a lot of thought into this, and we're continuing to refine the tools as the changes sort of roll out from Salesforce. We'll continue to tweak things to make sure we have the great tool set that you really need to make this transition. So Bill, thank you for your presentation. Thank everyone for your time, and we'll see you on the next one.